Okay, 30-second board. Topics in the sport. We have to go all the way back to before round one, media day. So this is terrible. RJ Hampshire, with all this momentum from Monster Energy Supercross 250 West title, breaks his wrist in a crash. I mean, crashes happen. Also, Garrett Marchbanks was part of something that probably should have been preventable, with riders crashing on top of each other on press day. The real question is this, JT. People are going to look at this and say, why are they doing this? Why are they doing press day? It's not really for press. The riders want to ride before the opener, ride their bikes, ride on the track. What's your take on riding Thursday and then the risk that they're taking?
Well, practicing and riding is just a natural part of the sport. You know, unfortunately, injuries come along with that. You know, the tough part, I got to speak with these riders at the opening round press conference maybe 2 hours before these crashes, and everybody was so optimistic, ready for a new championship, and then you see this unfold, and it's just heartbreaking. But we know people are going to get injured. It is a part of this sport. It is, you know, arguably the most difficult sport in the world, and this is one of the more nasty aspects of that. So these guys will be back. You know, they'll go home, heal up, and yeah, we'll see them more, you know, sooner rather than later. But when these things happen, it creates opportunity. You know, we have this fill-in ride situation that's happened in our sport for years, and riders like Ty Masterpool in this scenario grab this opportunity. We lost Cameron McAdoo and Seth Hamaker on, I believe, Tuesday before the event. Well, guess what? Ty Masterpool got to practice on the motorcycle on Friday and decided, yep, I'm in. I'm going to race this series on a Monster Energy Pro Circuit Kawasaki. And it didn't go particularly well, but I do think there will be brighter days ahead, and he showed some real promise, Weech.
Well, maybe a little too much for me. I was getting really, really excited. You see that crash there in the first moto. Luckily, he did get up. But the reason Ty Masterpool does not have a great bike when he's always stuck in this privateer void is because his Supercross results don't warrant it. This magical scenario where he gets on one of the best bikes in the series where he's really good, motocross, I was getting very fired up. It's the opportunity I think he and many of us have been waiting for to see. And then he starts the first moto fourth, and I'm like, what if he's a podium guy right off the start, gets better and better on this bike, and he's battling for the title? Okay, maybe I got ahead of myself, but I cannot overstate how good he is riding-wise in motocross, not supercross, and he's on a good bike. So keep watching that going forward. History is kind of the same story we talked about in Supercross. We have another brother 1-2 with the Lawrences. This did happen once before, technically, in this championship with the Jones brothers, Gary and Dwayne, but that's 1973. It's just a completely different phase of where the AMA National Motocross Championship was back then. To do this against this kind of competition, I don't care how many times it happens. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, this is really special, and I don't know, you know, it may be another 50 years before we see something like this again, to be this level of talent, to both be healthy at the same time and to be peaking at the same time where they're capable of this type of result. Think about the stars that have to align for something like this. And to me, the real winner of that entire dynamic is Darren Lawrence, the father, right? And Emma, their mother too. Like, think about how proud they have to be and the effort that they've gone to get their two children to the top of the sport, 1 and 2 in the premier class at the opening round of FIM Motocross. That is, that's truly something special. And, you know, speaking of that though, I thought James Stewart did a fantastic job of breaking down the differences in how these riders want their motorcycles to work.
Yeah, when I'm looking at Jet's bike, and you can tell by the rear fender, it's up, and then you notice that the rear wheel is moving, and the fenders is moving as well, but the rear wheel is working. Where you see Chase's motorcycle, it seems like the rear wheel is hanging up in the actual fender, like the whole bike is picking up.
He was watching Chase Sexton and Jet Lawrence battle it out, and their motorcycles really were working differently, and that allowed them to have both strengths and weaknesses around that Fox Raceway course. And you were wondering who would win out, which one of them would find a way to pass the other. But yes, the changes, and just I think this led to why Chase Sexton wanted to move to Red Bull KTM. He wanted a different direction in how his motorcycle operated, but it really did play out visually. And yeah, that's the upside of having someone so talented and so insightful like James Stewart in the booth with you, Leach, to break down that difference.
Try to make it as simple as possible. He was seeing how quick the rear suspension was reacting on Jet's bike, but a lot of riders don't like that. But James thinks coming out of corners, it can be faster. And Chase had more of that dead feeling. And JT, you've talked about it, many have. Riders hate when that back end is kicking them up. Some other riders who have to be happy with their motorcycles, they're all guessing going into round one. Let's run through what I'll call the others. We talked a lot about Hunter, Chase, Jet, but let's start there in Plessinger, back from injury. He was on fire first couple laps of Moto 1. Dylan Ferrandis, though, how do we interpret that? I think you and I are with Ferrandis thinks he can beat anybody. He didn't podium. To me, that's a disappointment for him. He'll get better as it goes. Malcolm Stewart, great job coming back. Justin Barsha, Jason Anderson really did well coming through traffic. But I want to talk about the Ferrandis piece. He's got to fancy himself as a guy that can win races, right?
I do think he looks at this series that way. Now, in his heart of hearts, I think he wonders, can he beat Jet over the course of 22 motos straight up? But we know this sport, things happen. Motorcycles have mechanical difficulties, injuries happen. But everyone else, I think Ferrandis sees himself as their equal or better. He was the 2021 450 Pro Motocross champion, and I think he can get back there on this Honda. He believes that deep down. So he gave away some points, had a couple crashes on Saturday, but big picture, long term, I think he believes that he can be a real player in this series.
Okay, now we get into maybe the hottest topic of all, which is penalties. Going to get Mike Pelletier, the director of racing for the AMA, on here. In a nutshell, we had Tom Vial penalized for going off track in the first 250 moto. You'll see it right here. And this was a one position penalty, JT. You think this jump might have had something to do with it?
Yeah, it's hard not to think that the optics of him doubling back onto the racetrack didn't play a role. And then you see the other here, Haiden Deegan goes around. He kind of takes a look over, and just, I think the lack of acceleration about right there, where you can see his body language, he checks up a little bit. I think things like that make all the difference in the world.
Okay, well, let's let Mike Pelletier come on here to explain why one rider was penalized and one rider was not. And now joined by the AMA's Mike Pelletier. I know you were working really late after the race to try to sort it out with Haiden Deegan, and we'll get into the specifics of each incident. But first, just explain, who is the group that helps decide penalties or no penalties like this?
Yeah, that's a good question, Weege. And there's a panel that we created quite a few years ago. We call it Race Direction. So I have a Race Direction team. It's more of a committee based when it comes to infractions or reviewing footage. It's myself, Tim McAdams, and a rider rep. That's a fairly new position the last few years. This past weekend, for example, it was Andrew Short.
Andrew Short, yes. So if people are wondering, it's not just you. You had a ex-professional racer in there weighing in on this.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's good every weekend. We also have Jeremy Albrecht that comes in from time to time, Christina Denny. So a lot of different viewpoints, a lot of good perspectives, and Andrew was certainly a benefit this weekend.
Cool.
So let's jump into the nitty gritty of this. Obviously, the first one that we had to cross was Tom Vial. His off-track excursion in the first moto drew a penalty. And walk us through the thought process and exactly what was, in the end, the reason that he did incur that penalty.
Sure. So I'd like to start by the rule itself. So in Pro Motocross, it's very specific. There's really three main aspects to the rule, right? Did the rider, when he goes off track, did he gain a time or a position advantage? That's one. Did he fail to slow down? That's two. And did he accelerate in an unsafe manner? That's three. So it doesn't mean that all three need to line up for a penalty. There's multiple things we can look at. Those are the main three as it's written in the rule. So in Tom's case, he went off the track as Race Direction reviewed the footage, realized he never broke from race pace, so he failed to slow down. And when he did come back on, he really didn't assess the situation safely. We felt that when he came back onto the racetrack, he just jumped back onto the track. So that was a set penalty in the penalty chart. It's a one position penalty. So he was assessed that one position penalty for that situation.
Okay. So now we jump to Moto 2, and I'm sure this is what has kept you from sleeping the last night or two. Haiden Deegan goes off the track as well, right? And we saw riders going off the track throughout the weekend, berms blowing out. This is for the overall win, though, right? All eyes are on Haiden Deegan, and this did not incur a penalty. So walk us through. It seems like this was a subject that was talked about heavily after the race because we had a delay in official results and press conference. But what was the reasoning for him not getting a penalty the way that Tom Vial did?
Sure. And it's important, I think, for everybody to know we have a lot of footage behind the scenes, not just the broadcast footage, right? So we can pull the drone footage, different camera angles. We go as far back to see his previous lap. How much time did it take him in that section, the segment times, all of that's really dissected. And we try to do that as fast as we can. We do need to clean that up because I think it took too long on Saturday night. But it's important for us to also dissect that and come up with the right decision. So as race direction, we reviewed that. When Haiden went off the racetrack, he did assess. He looked around. We felt that he did break race pace. And for sure, he lost time based off our footage. So those three areas is what we assessed and decided to no penalty.
So what made that one take so long to figure out?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jason. And we try to do it as fast as we can, but it's more important. And all the footage we have, all the data points we want to look at, it's important to get it right. And that takes time to do. Now we're working on trying to do that faster. But again, with all the interviews we want to do and all the footage we want to receive and look at and view and assess, that just takes some time. And that's what took so long.
All right. Thanks for the clarity. Maybe a little easier weekend coming up in Hangtown. We'll have to see.
Looking forward to Hangtown.
So penalties aside, look, Haiden Deegan was the best rider at Fox Raceway. So really the question is this, JT. We know the potential he has. Is this shot across the bow and this is the way it's going to be and he's the guy to beat? Or is this just round one of motocross, which often proves zero?
I do think he is the guy to beat. You know, you look at the series last year, he really kind of asserted himself at Washougal, and yes, he had some struggles down the stretch, but I think he sent a message last year, and he's just carrying that through this year. Now, I don't think he's going to go on an undefeated streak or anything. I think Levi Kitchen and others have something to say about that, but he was my favorite going into the championship, and when you take RJ Hampshire out, you take some of these other competitors out, why wouldn't he be the one that we're pointing to be the heir apparent?
Yeah, that's true. Now, we will get more data on Deegan's lap times, Levi Kitchen's lap times, et cetera, when we bring Clinton Fowler on for our SMX Facts segment later. And the fact that Vial did end up third overall, I don't think Deegan, Kitchen, Vial podium surprised anyone, but shout out to Chance Hymas, who was in that fight with them all afternoon. He actually technically was third in the first moto after the Vial penalty. What do you think? Is this more like we should expect going forward for the 48?
Well, I just think it was a breath of fresh air for both he and Honda HRC. You know, this is a coveted ride, and you look at the history and the results of what that motorcycle he's on have done. It was the motorcycle that Jet Lawrence was on. It was the motorcycle that Hunter Lawrence won this very championship on a year ago. So the expectations are high, even though it's only year two for him. So does he need to go win? I would say probably not, but showing signs of life, getting in the battle, turning in fast lap times, those are the things that he needs to show Honda management that are going to give him a new contract, keep him around, and really just the belief that he is going to turn into the rider that they want him to. That's the key thing here. And I thought that was a huge step on Saturday towards that very goal.
Huge step toward other goals. Let's look at some riders that showed up with SMX points on the line. Dean Wilson had long since said he was done racing motocross because his knees are so bad, but he did decide to race this first round. He wanted to be top 10. He just missed it. I think it was 11-15 in his two motos, but helped him add a couple more points to his SMX total. Same thing with Justin Hill, who got a 19th in a moto. But how about our guy, Phil Nicoletti, who's starting from zero because he raced 250s in Supercross. Man, he scored a bunch already.
Yeah, and I think these guys, they learned so much. Justin Hill's brother, Josh Hill, was a big part of that story last season. So it's going to be fun to watch that whole thing play out. Guys going for points where maybe they would be sitting on the couch at home taking it easy. But guess what? They're lining up for Pro Motocross because they understand that they need to rack those points up. They want to guarantee themselves one of those 20 spots into the main event. And what I think about is, remember last year at Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, the SMX finale, Ricky Carmichael, Jeff Stanton come riding down the peristyle on those Triumphs, right? And I remember standing there thinking, what is that program going to look like? How difficult is it going to be to jump into an ultra competitive 250 class in 2024? Well, guess what? They have arrived and they have impressed from day one. Jalik Swoll, I thought, had a great Mushroom Supercross campaign. And then Joey Savacci coming into this series red hot, almost qualifying fastest. I don't have the right vocabulary to really express how impressed I've been with a first-year effort on a brand new motorcycle. They look like they're a decade deep into this thing, and they look like they're ready to battle for race wins.
Yeah, bummer for Savacci to go down in the first turn of the second moto, and that hurt him big time in points. Because even though this is new, the bike, and him going back to this class for the first time in 8 years, He thinks he can win this title. And if every point counts, that second moto was costly. Yes, the overall look, the performance, the speed. I mean, JT, you saw it. He was a half a lap away from being the fast qualifier on Saturday morning. That's all very impressive. One last topic. Let's just update the SMX points. And this is where it's really going to get interesting when we start putting the motocross scores into the mix. Kitchen's ahead of Deegan because he did score more in Supercross. And they did even drop one West race. That's just that huge first turn crash in Detroit still holding Deegan's point score back. But when you get back to the end of this top 20, Hamaker, McAdoo, where are they going to end up? We go to the 450 class. Dylan Ferrand is probably going to move up and other riders moving out. This will be wild. The race to not be in the LCQs, JT.
Yeah, this is going to be an ever-changing landscape. These guys from 11 through 20, as you mentioned, those are the ones that are in the danger zone. And I don't mean Haiden Deegan. They're going to be ebbing and flowing because some of them have injuries. Some of them are not racing the Pro Motocross Championship. And there is a laundry list of riders behind them that want to climb into this top 20 and guarantee themselves a spot on that main event starting line when we get to Charlotte. So it's something we're going to have to keep an eye on every single week. And a lot of those names you're seeing in there right now will not be there when we get to North Carolina.
And don't forget, the seeding will be determined by the combined points into the playoffs. For example, the rider who has the most points will have a 3-point edge over the rider second in points when the playoffs begin. And with just 3 races, 3 points could loom large. So Deegan not only wants to win the Pro Motocross title, he wants to outscore Kitchen by enough to be ahead of him in seeding going into SMX playoffs and the World Championship as well. So a lot to watch there. And if you folks want to watch it, we're on the same schedule we were for Fox Raceway. That means 1 o'clock Eastern, Race Day Live. That'll be our 1-hour qualifying show presented by motorsport.com. And then motos start at 4 o'clock Eastern time. That's 1 o'clock out in California. And there'll be 4 straight hours of coverage. You can watch all of it on Peacock or the SMX Video Pass outside the United States.
Hi folks, Lee Diffie from NBC Sports here. If you truly enjoyed what you just watched, you can get more news, interviews, and highlights by subscribing to the Motorsports on NBC YouTube page. You can get it all, so go for it.